Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning, good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And today we're going to have so much fun and learn. Today is really going to be one of those programs where I hope everyone comes away with 1, 2, maybe more things that they really need to be thinking seriously about regarding their business. And we try and do that every program, but this in particular is something that I think is so important. And it's also near and dear to my heart because it kind of harkens back to my days in corporate America. And so we're going to be talking with someone today about crisis management and reputation management. And so we're going to have so much fun today talking with Bill Coletti. So Bill, thank you for joining us today.
Deb, thank you. I'm super excited to have this conversation. And you just mentioned it, is with your history and track record, I think we can sort of tease out a lot of really cool stuff that's valuable to people. So thank you.
Well, and we could probably talk for 3 or 4 hours at least. And so, we'll make sure that we follow our timeline.
A multi-part episode.
This is true. This is true. Well, let me tell people a little bit about you and then we'll jump back into this. So Bill Coletti is a reputation management, crisis communications, and professional development expert, keynote speaker, Wall Street Journal risk and compliance panelist, and best-selling author of Critical Moments, The New Mindset of Reputation Management. He has more than 25 years of global experience managing high-stakes crisis, issues management, and media relations challenges for both Fortune 500 companies and winning global political campaigns. So again, Bill, welcome.
Deb, thanks so much. I'm looking forward to an amazing conversation.
It is going to be so much fun. And, as I was reading your book, show your book.
All right. There we go. This is the book, the Critical Moments book.
There we go. One of the things that struck me is every person needs to be concerned about reputation management and crisis management. And it doesn't matter if you are a Fortune 500 company, which clearly is going to have a lot of issues, or if you're a single brand like me, I could do something that would totally mess up my company. Or if you are a small business. How many times has one bad Yelp review totally disrailed or, even sunk a company? And I think that's the thing that so many small businesses really don't think about is, what would happen if that influencer in my neighborhood or my community posted something horrible about me online? Or what if somebody started talking about me at church? Or all of these various things. And so your reputation, whether it's your business, your personal, the combination of, I think we always have to be very cognizant of how we're managing that.
Oh, absolutely. And large or small. And, and one Yelp review, there are people out there that just enjoy trash talking. And you could be, I like to talk about pizza. You could be the best pizza pie maker in your town and everybody loves you and the football team goes there Friday night and it's an amazing, amazing experience. But someone could come along and say the pizza sucks and, Lucy, the waitress, was horrible. There's not much you can do about that. The strategy is not to have zero tolerance for that or flip out if there's one incidence of that. The strategy is that you want to build your reputation over long term so that you've got this reservoir of goodwill so that when you respond back and say, well, I'm sorry, Mr. Smith, that you felt that way. Lucy's been with us for 25 years. We're really confident in the way she does things or whatever the case may be. But you want to build that reservoir of goodwill so that the people that really matter give you the benefit of the doubt. So I talk about benefit of the doubt. That's really what you want because it's the Yelp experience didn't mean that, that's just this crazy anomaly of this person commenting on it. Or we're an industrial company or a bank and we have a data breach, or we're an industrial company and we have something that blows up and somebody gets hurt. You want to have built a reservoir of goodwill and you get the benefit of the doubt that says, we made a mistake, we're going to fix it, but we are the guys that you thought we were. Right. We're the team that you thought we were from way back when. So that's, so it's, there's the pizza shop, and there's also then sort of more corporate experiences as well. So the goal is to build that reservoir of goodwill so that you get the benefit of the doubt.
Right. So let's go back a little bit in time. How is it that you decided that this is your passion in life?
Yeah, a terrific question. So I love that your show is of length that lets me sort of give, evolving, interesting stories, or what I think to be interesting. You'll be the judge of whether it's interesting or not. But, I started in high school when I was a junior, or excuse me, I was a senior in high school. I was student government president of my high school, and I went to the supervisor of elections office and I said, I want the next student government election. I'm graduating and gone, but I want the next student government election for us to use voting machines, and
in high school.
And said, so I went to the supervisor of elections office, and I said, can we get one of those machines, or 10 of those machines, so that students can actually vote it? And for those of you that voting historians, in the year 2000, those exact machines in the great state of Florida, which is where I'm from, became kind of iconic. And so these are the big blue boxes, and you had a stylus and a pin, and you had to poke through them, and you had all these hanging chads. So in my high school, we brought those machines and we did it. On that journey, I met an amazing woman who was the deputy, or the assistant to the supervisor of elections in our town, and she got me involved in politics. And that's, I had a little bit of interest in politics, got me involved in politics. I started running my first race my freshman year of college. I ran a state Senate race, and then that evolved into more involvement in college, and then graduating, and I ran political races for the first 10, 15 years of my career. So did politics. And then in around 1994, a company based in Austin, which is where I live now, excuse me, the company where I live now, they asked, would I open up a public affairs firm? And so the transition from campaigns to company was a really nice and logical transition. And then about 5 years ago, I started my own firm. So it's, candidates it's a very ministerial, counseling, as well as strategy and tactics. It's got all these elements of what I do now, but it's a different application of those skill sets to a government context, or excuse me, to a business context from when we were doing it in politics. Right. So that's kind of the long arc of kind of how I got to where I am now. Right.
And it's funny. We have, in several ways, very similar background. I spent time in Colorado as a lobbyist. And, that to me was very interesting also, because it was very much about reputation, especially when we would be working with coalitions on some, or even, a company on an issue that they felt was important, and as everyone knows, organizations and companies hire lobbyists, then the lobbyists are going and, they do the nitty gritty work of trying to get the votes and all of those various things. And, it was very interesting to see. I tell people it's very much like knowing how sausage is made. Now you think, ugh, but it was very interesting to see how all of that comes together. And in particular, how reputations are very important. You might have someone who is extremely passionate about something, but not really the best person that you want to be involved, for whatever reason, and of course we see that a lot in politics, and we see it especially now with celebrities, where you get a celebrity spokesperson who is either for or against a candidate, an issue, or whatever. And, and so managing all of that is just, it comes back to that old herding cats thing.
Oh, absolutely. So, there's a lot of definitions of reputation, a lot of definitions of corporate reputation that's there. And Seth Godin, are you familiar with Seth Godin?
Oh, yes, of course.
Yeah, I'm sure you are. And a lot of the folks that listen to you, I'm sure, are familiar with Seth. Seth has a very interesting definition. I have one, and there's some academic ones as well. But one of Seth's definition of reputation, it is the expectation that people have of the next thing you're going to do, say, or make. Okay. And so whether you're a company, if you're making something, or what you're going to do or say.
Right.
And so
I love that next thing part.
It's the expectation. So it's,
Mm-hmm.
so I've coined it. So this notion of nexpectation is
Mm-hmm.
this next expectation that
Mm-hmm.
you have for someone. And so when you're thinking about those folks and those coalitions that you are building and the teams and the lobbying, is that your internal computer was going off really quickly,
Mm-hmm.
thinking about, okay, well, I've seen A, B, C, and D from this person.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty confident I know what E is going to be.
Right.
And I know, and that is based
Mm-hmm.
on their reputation.
Mm-hmm.
And that is your expectation of what they're going to do next.
Mm-hmm.
And so in a corporate context, companies have that as well. I think we have an expectation of Starbucks and we have an expectation of Walmart, just
Right.
to use two brands
Mm-hmm.
that everybody's heard of.
Right. And they might not be positive.
No, absolutely not. But and that's the point, is that
Mm-hmm.
it is the expectation of what you're going to do next. So I have an expectation of, in fact, some industries. So I have an
Mm-hmm.
expectation in the aviation industry,
Mm-hmm.
which is completely different than my expectation in the luxury hotel,
Mm-hmm.
hotel
Right.
category. If the luxury hotel treated me the same way that the airlines treated me, there would be a total disconnect.
Oh, right.
And that would
Mm-hmm.
never, ever work.
Mm-hmm.
Because airlines, I have the expectation, and they know that I have the expectation, that it's a cattle car.
Mm-hmm.
Even higher end brands in
Mm-hmm.
the airline industry, of which
Right.
there's very few.
Mm-hmm.
Starbucks and Walmart, the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, people have negative perceptions of Walmart.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's changing. I know
Mm-hmm.
the team over there, they're doing a great job
Mm-hmm.
of changing that. But I think Starbucks, we all feel really pretty good about Starbucks.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I think it's good products. It's
Mm-hmm.
good team. They're training their teams.
Mm-hmm.
They've got this cool partnership with Arizona State University, so that when they have this stumble, and they've had a couple of them
Mm-hmm.
related to store managers calling police and the law
Mm-hmm.
enforcement getting involved about African Americans not
Mm-hmm.
ordering
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. So they've had these little challenges. We've all said, Starbucks is not a racist organization.
Right.
Starbucks, we give them
Mm-hmm.
the benefit of the doubt,
Mm-hmm.
because our expectation of what they're going to do
Mm-hmm.
next is that they're going to double down on training, and they're going to do, really make sure that their
Mm-hmm.
baristas and their team members are good on that.
Right.
Walmart does that and either imports a defective product or pays lower wages. We unfortunately have an expectation about that. Now, I'm sympathetic to Walmart because they're
Right.
my friends.
Mm-hmm.
That's not true, but to
Mhm.
your point earlier, it doesn't matter.
Right.
That is the expectation over time, and that's the critical element of reputation.
Mhm.
And so we've just met recently. You're shaping an expectation of me.
Mhm.
I am reinforcing my reputation, but you don't have the benefit of long-term.
Mhm.
Your neighbor, your business partner, your clients, your folks that you've worked with, you do have that. And so
Mhm.
that's why reputation is so challenging, is that it takes a long time to grow it, and
Right.
it also takes a long time to change it.
Mhm.
And it also then the beneficiary takes a long time to hurt it.
Mhm.
And so I don't believe in the split second reputation damage.
Mhm.
I think you can actually sort of do things to mitigate that.
Right. And we do hear things, the split second things, Starbucks, great example, where, somebody writes something on a coffee cup that they shouldn't,
Right.
and you've got, the flurry of people that, I'm never going to go to Starbucks again. Well, okay, maybe they went to Starbucks once a year.
Right.
And things like that. And so it's not, but, and those tend to fade away quickly. And the one thing that you and I were talking about before the program is I have a background in crisis management also. And
Yep.
one of the things that always strikes me, especially with Starbucks or things like that, is one of the very first things that they do is they say, we're sorry.
Amen.
That shouldn't have happened.
Yes.
And, and they're not even, sometimes they're not even saying it did happen. I mean, there is that, but they're saying it shouldn't happen. We do training. We're going to do more training. Here's what we're going to do to fix it. And I remember back when I really was doing a lot of crisis management where, many times when we wanted to say, I'm sorry, people said, oh, no, you can't say that because you're accepting blame. And then
The general counsel, the litigators, the attorneys.
Yes, because then when you accept blame, you can be sued.
Mhm.
And I would tell people, no. It's just like, say you're in a restaurant. And, I go in with my big purse. I set it on the floor. Waiter trips over it, spills a glass of cold water on me. Now, that was my fault. My purse was there. It was in the way.
Mhm.
If the waiter says, well, you dingbat, your purse was in the way, I'm mad.
Mhm.
If the waiter says, oh my gosh, I am so sorry, can I get you a free dessert? I think that's the greatest place in the world. You know, and so I'm sorry is not we're to blame. And I think that's one of the biggest things that so many people, and it doesn't matter the size of the organization, have to get over is, and that's really what a lot of people want to hear. They want to hear, I'm sorry.
I totally agree. And so you're like at the leading edge of thinking on that, and your corporate journey, that illustration is perfect. That is the exact journey that we've been on. I think 10 years ago, litigators and advisors gave the counsel that you just explained. You can't apologize because we can't accept blame, because then that's going to increase our legal liability. I think the pendulum has swung back or swung in the other direction. And what I'm seeing with our clients is a desire to over apologize.
Right.
And so just like in every context, so your instinct is right, but as this is all I do, and this is all I do is I think about risk and crisis and reputation, is that the way I think that best in class companies need to do it. I think good companies take your counsel now of, hey, should we or could we apologize? Bad companies still have their head in the sand. So there's 3 evolutions of bad, of good, and then great. I think what great companies are doing, great companies look at risk in 3 ways. They look at risk as strategic risk, preventable risk, and external risk. So 3 fundamental types of risk. And let me explain them because it impacts the reason and the rationale of if or how you apologize. Right. So if you want me, let me sort of explain that a little bit deeper.
Definitely.
So we all have these 3 types of risks. It's comes from the financial industry primarily when we do risk evaluation and stress testing. And so a strategic risk, a risk we meant to take for superior economic benefit. Okay, so we intended to raise our prices. We intended to close a factory. We intended to lay off some employees. That is a strategic decision that smart people, you've been in those decisions where you sat on teams and we said, okay, we're going to have to do this thing. We're making a strategic risk decision for economic benefit. We're doing it to improve ourselves. So that's one type of risk. The second is these preventable risks. Metal shavings should never be in hamburgers if we make food. If we produce hamburgers or make patties, metal shavings from the machine that produces the ground beef should not be there. There should be 0 tolerance for that. And so there's no economic benefit, obviously, that comes from that. And so there should be a 0 tolerance. External is hurricanes, the weather.
Right.
Some would argue that an active shooter, I can't really control a crazy person running on my campus or running right there that's there. Now, some people argue that with magnetometers and what like that you could, but I think realistically, they're external. They're out of my control that's there. So if you agree with that archetype, and I've been talking about this for years now, strategic, preventable, and external, to your point about apology, if it is preventable, if we have metal shavings that are in the ground beef, we have nothing else to say other than to say, we're sorry. Right. We're going to fix it. And here's a coupon. Right. Or whatever the remediation is.
Let's blame somebody else or let's ignore it or any of those things.
Or no, we didn't. Or that was that, that's the machine, the manufacturer. So we saw BP do that. BP, that was a preventable accident in the Gulf of Mexico, and blaming Halliburton or blaming some company we've never heard of is not the way this is supposed to work. Is that they were so preventable things that simply should not happen. You should have 0 tolerance for. The model for you and I as communicators, the model is apologize, fix it, and get back to business as fast as you can. Strategic risks. And so I'm sure you've been in those meetings where we've got to do that. We've got to raise a fee, close a branch, do whatever we got to do. Companies make those strategic decisions. The public reacts negatively to it or has some sort of something that doesn't go exactly as planned. Too many companies think that is the opportunity to apologize, to say, I'm sorry. Well, we didn't. You can't really say, we didn't really mean to raise our rates. We didn't really mean to close the factory. We meant to do it. So it is, so Deb, I'm sorry you misunderstood. Let me do a better job of explaining. So I'm not apologizing for raising fees or closing the school or whatever the decision is, because I did it for superior economic gain. The thing I may be apologizing for is that I had a poor job of communicating to you. I did a poor job of explaining it to you. And so the apology is not about the act. That's not very strategic. And then external things that happen is the benefit there is that you're apologizing for the inconvenience. Because you're apologizing for the trouble that this has created. You're not apologizing for the hurricane.
Right.
And the other benefit of external is typically if it's these force majeure events or these active nature events that affect all of us, every company, is that you get the benefit of kind of being in the herd. You're not alone. Metal shavings in the ground beef is typically that company on that day. The strategic decision is primarily that company on that day that makes those decisions. So I think about, I'm with you that apology is the definition of bad to good. I think the distinction of apology between good to great is really understanding the underlying risk, because that pendulum, as you and I talked about, now I talk to clients and while they used to put their head in the sand, and that was your experience or that you had seen sometimes because of litigation, everybody's now like apologizing all over themselves for all kinds of ridiculous things. And we lose credibility. We lose credibility when we do that. So as with everything in business and as with everything in life, it gets a little bit more complicated. It's not binary anymore. It's complicated. So if you think about your risk that way, strategic, preventable, and external, it then shapes for you and I, the communicators, it shapes for us the response, which makes us faster.
Right. And sometimes the response really is no response. Because, something that might seem catastrophic might really not be. I was involved in a situation, years ago at an organization where there was something that happened that a very small number of people. Now, this was a serious issue. We never wanted to downplay it, but it was only a very small portion of people thought this was something that was catastrophic. And my advice to them was, let's hold out for a couple of days. And I said, let's just let stuff settle, let things calm down. Let's not respond from, oh my gosh, what do we need to do? What do we need to do now? Because then you don't get things right. We needed, and what happened was something bigger and more catastrophic something else happened and totally took away our news. I mean, and so our little issue became a non-news cycle. And we said, and we don't ever talk about it again. Don't bring it up again. Don't, just let it die. Now we had, messaging and things like that in case it came up again. But we just, it was like something else in the world will come up. All these various things that have been happening recently, people are getting very overexcited about a lot of things. And then that little thing called coronavirus comes up, or impeachment or, all these things. Usually some bigger news cycle comes along, and so sometimes it really, it's not that you're burying your head in the sand. It's that you're just timing things.
Yeah. So it's interesting, reflecting on what you just said. I was going to come back with two things, and you said you were ready. You had the holding statements. Again, another example of you being a great leader and sort of really helping those organizations that you've worked with in that example. Too often, if you hadn't said that part and you said it, at like the 2/3 mark of that statement that you just made, there are too often that companies where hope is a strategy.
Right.
Let's just hope.
Hope and pray.
Hope nobody hears about this because we're not ready.
Right.
So hope that doesn't happen. That wasn't your strategy. That might have been a little bit of your strategy is let's, hopefully that doesn't happen. But if it does, we're ready. And we've got reactive statements ready. We have thought this through. We know what's going to happen. And so, yes, you don't need to make the situation worse, but hope is not a strategy. And there are too many companies that say, well, this is too small. This will blow over. Not a big deal. That's great. Let's hope that that's the case, but let's really be ready and have those tools and resources, and let's think it through. And so one of the things I've talked about in my role in working with clients is that of kind of a professional nag. I get to kind of nag people into saying, well, okay, cool. Let's cross our fingers and hope, because that very well may happen. It happened to my friend Deb. It may happen to you. But let's be ready just in case, because what if? Because then that gets back to this foundational premise about, speed really matters in a crisis.
Right.
So being reactive is okay. Social media's changed that a lot. Filling the vacuum and no, because you're trying to time it. If I understood your strategy right, you're trying to time it that will respond when asked, or will respond if this blows up. Social has changed that. If you don't have your social media listening dialed in and you don't have your big ears on, that's when the train could leave the station and you're still thinking everything's cool.
Right.
And so that's part of the challenge. You got to be able to listen, a little bit of hunch and gut and things like that.
Right.
So, but there's nothing wrong with that.
No, and it is tricky, especially with social media, because, you might go to bed thinking everything's hunky-dory and you wake up and it's not. And whether you are the Fortune 500 company or, the little business around the block, you never know when things could blow up. And you mentioned at the start, the people, the Yelp people who just love to get in there. One of my clients had somebody who was an employee for a day. Didn't work out. And she, of course, posted about this company on Google reviews. So, same type of thing. At 2:00 on a Saturday morning. There might have been a little that was involved, or who knows. But she it was horrible. It was awful. Sure. Now the nice thing is I get notifications, because that's part of what I do for that organization is I get notifications when someone posts a review, positive, negative, whatever. So I knew about this at about 6:00 in the morning. Did I know it too? No. I'm not, they're not paying me that much money. But, so I knew about it. And then of course you have to craft a response. And I told them, I said, this is not ostrich time. I said, but we have to be very careful with what we say, because we cannot say you were just an employee for a day and you were a dingbat and you didn't work out. We can't, we couldn't go anywhere near any of that stuff. And I said, and more importantly, our response was not for her. Our response was for everyone else who was going to potentially read it.
Totally.
And I said, so what we're going to say is, thank you so much for bringing your concerns to our attention. Please know that we do this and this and this and this and this. And that was it. Yeah. Right. It totally blew over. There was nothing else that happened. She didn't respond. Now we researched her, and she was one of those people that, she didn't like Chick-fil-A. Right. She was one of those people that just really liked to respond and say horrible, awful things. But, we obviously couldn't point that out, but we also couldn't afford to ignore that, because what she was talking about was health and safety of people that we were working with. And so we just could not ignore that. But, somebody 5 years from now that might read that goes, oh, well, gosh, she was kind of a, and look how they responded, and that really is in many cases what we're wanting to do is, what are the future people going to think when they read this?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's play out that real case, but now let's make it a little bit more hypothetical. So let's say you guys returned serve. She served, you returned serve.
We did kind of a soft volley back.
Absolutely. So what if she had responded? I believe that it is appropriate. You had said you can't just say a statement and just say go pound sand. Right. You can't do that. I am increasingly thinking and working with clients in different situations that in the return of the volley that you can do that. You can say, I am sorry that you really feel this way. Right. Obviously, fill in the blank. I think there is room for a little bit more on your feet, not insulting, not aggressive, not to the Trump levels, but I think that there is room to actually say, we're done with this conversation. Thank you very much. If you've done what you did, we do A, B, C, D, and E. And therefore, but if they want to, what's that old saying is, don't get in a fight with a pig, they enjoy it. And so I think that's where it is. So I don't, I'm not opposed to considering. It doesn't mean I want to do it, but I'm not opposed to considering closing the book, pretty quickly in those, but on the second engagement, not that first one. Your first instinct is right. Thoughts on that? Does that make sense to you? Can you
I like that. Yeah.
You can close the book?
Yeah. Because then if they volley back, they look petty, they look bitchy, they look nasty. Yeah. And then that is the point where you stop. And that is one of the hardest things. I got into one of those on Facebook with somebody one time. And, and it was one of those where, that little voice in my head was saying, stop it, stop it, stop it.
And you're a pro, and you know better.
and I just couldn't. And we went too far. I mean, now.
Is this in a professional context or a friend?
Both. So it was a friend who was saying something he shouldn't have.
Okay.
And, and I think that was what got me was, this was a friend. It was somebody, and it was a true friend, not a Facebook friend. And he just kept digging and he kept digging because he knew, and of course, every time I hit, respond, I'm like, but, so we went a couple, now it was still on both sides, very respectful, no name calling, no, nothing like that. But the funny thing was I ended it, finally thought, okay, enough of this. And I ended it with, oh my gosh, this has been so much fun. I can't wait to have coffee together the next time we're in Colorado.
Sure.
And what immediately happened, I got unfriended. It was just the funniest thing in the world. And I thought, well, clearly we weren't friends. But, the point I'm trying to make is when that little voice says, stop typing, stop speaking, shut up, pay attention to that little voice.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then, the other strategy, just to be at a very real level, and I'm sure you'd agree with this, if you're in that dialogue past the third, 1, 2, 3, take it offline.
Right.
Let's just
and
go to email one-on-one.
Yeah, please call me, please email me, whatever.
No one needs to watch the tennis match. They got the US, they can watch the US Open or the Australian Open.
Right.
To do that.
And let's be honest, we do kind of watch those on occasion, especially on Facebook on something, but then it reaches a point where we're like, oh my God.
But that's not what pros do. And that's not what, back to the topic at hand. If you're invested in growing your reputation based on what the next thing you say or do, the expectation of the next thing you say or do, you don't want to be that company.
No.
That serves no purpose. Now you can be that person on Facebook all day long. And therefore that will be your reputation, is that when there's a topic of X, we know we're going to get Y back from that person. Right. Most companies, there's very little interest in doing that. But ironically, I did see there was a professional services firm, and I don't remember exactly what it was, maybe a law firm or an insurance company or something like that, but a financial services kind of firm, where the CEO was actually the voice, and he had a reputation in the marketplace of being pretty gruff and being a tough boss. In fact, they'd written articles about him being a tough boss, but a fair boss and paid well and things like that. He was the voice on social and would just shut stuff down and, just say, Deb, you're wrong. Don't bother me again.
Right.
I mean, things like that.
Right.
And if you can pull it off, cool.
To that, you're like, okay.
Yeah. And if he can pull it off, cool. Very few companies, A, have that cojones to do that, and B, don't have that voice in the marketplace, because that's a pretty inauthentic voice. I do see, I am not a fan of our president, and not to make this political, but I do observe his communication style.
Right. Oh yeah.
Is that I think that pugilistic, combative approach he has given that favor, and I can see it potentially working in social.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting when you see, someone who immediately responds. And I think that's part of, what I always think about with him. And again, we're not going to get political about this, but there are times where I just think, pause. Can you please just pause? Stop,
Right.
And, and then of course I always think, oh my gosh, the poor people who are advising him, but that's totally different.
But reputationally, it makes me pause before I swing first or I react, because
you do.
He's not even going to think.
Right. How are people going to respond? And you look at other examples, of, say, an organization who has a very powerful leader, or someone who is very popular or something like that, a Richard Branson, you almost never see him, or Bill Gates. They're two of the people that you never really see respond. And I'm sure that's obviously very deliberate. They and let's be honest, they have opinions. They want to respond. They just don't, or they respond in a different manner, a different place, things like that. But it can backfire. Let's look at Tesla. I mean, Elon Musk, bless his heart. Let's see, you can tell I live in Atlanta now. There are times where you just want to say, okay, you need to not say something right now. And so it's interesting when you have a company that has a strong leader, how their personal becomes part of that company. And that's, that's especially where, and again, it doesn't matter if it's a huge company or something small. I mean, how many times have we seen a small business that's totally destroyed when, say, someone gets a DUI and it makes the newspaper, or something like that. And
bad
so,
business deal, malfeasance.
It is, you always have to be watching things like that. And especially in this day and age of social media where, things go and things pop off. I was reading, one of the stories about the Houston Astros, and I know you're in Texas, but you're not in Houston. And, they're a big kerfluffle with, they've cheated and things like that. And one of the comments from one of the higher mucky ups was, we see no reason why we need to apologize for anything.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, somebody just put a bag over that man's head and don't let him speak again, because they did need to apologize. They do need to apologize because, and part of it is ego. They think, well, but, and that's where it comes, where it's tricky too, is where you as the person think, wait a minute, I did nothing wrong. Or what are you making such a big deal about this for? And so there are times where you just got to eat a little crow and say, you know what?
And I try to, in that Astros example, I'm curious your reaction. What's the greater sin? Is the greater sin not apologizing, or is the greater sin not seeing?
I'm not seeing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can fix the apology. That's a press release. That's 5 minutes away.
Oh, yeah.
The fundamental fact that they don't see it says so much about their reputation on many, many aspects. That's there. Yeah. Similar question. I was trying to think this through of the equivalency. There have been plane accidents, obviously where there's tragedies where lots of people dies, but there have been one or two plane incidences that I can think of where an individual got hurt on a plane. So if we have this plane accident done by Virgin and they run an airline where one person got hurt, and at Tesla where one person got hurt, which CEO would you expect to send a personal handwritten note to that family?
Branson.
Without question.
And
you would even
actually,
think about it for Tesla.
I would see him going to them.
Yeah, and that's why I was trying to, when I was thinking it through to ask you this question, there's a plane crash, that's easy. If 500 people died or 200 people died in Teslas, I think Musk would go. I think he'd get there. But that, I don't want to get lost in that. The point, that is your expectation of those two men. And I think it's right on. That is then the definition of their reputation. That's what we're trying to build on. Right. And that's what your leaders that are listening to you, that's what they need to think about.
Right. And it is planning for that, and that's one of the things that you talk about in your book is we have to be thinking in advance. Because we're thinking about things that are going to happen in the future. And so back to your book, which is Critical Moments, and the new mindset of reputation management. See, I have the digital version, so I should bring my little iPad and hold my iPad up.
Exactly.
But you talk about the 4 A's. Yep. So let's go through those because those are very important because it really does start with the first A, which is awareness. So talk to us about the 4 A's.
Yeah. So the journey of the 4 A's came about is that I just finished a crisis engagement with a client, and it was a really wonderful female CEO, and she just got it. She understood intuitively what we were talking about. And so this crisis happened. they needed to apologize. They did apologize. They fixed it. She survived, it survived, and they moved on. And so really well executed strategy. She and I, it had kind of come to close. It was about a 10-day problem. It had come to a close, and during the course of those 10 days and in the previous relationship that we had, I was talking about reputation management. I was talking about the need. We need to start a reputation management program. We need to think about that. And we were at this debrief meeting sitting together, and I said it again, and she said, so you've said that to me a number of times, but I don't understand it. Can you tell me what you mean? And I said, well, and I went on through my good consultant talk, and her feedback to me was, so you mean kind of like the 4 Ps of marketing. I need a way of understanding what you're talking about reputation the same way I understand marketing. And so I'm sure you're familiar with the 4 Ps of marketing: price, product, place, promotion. It's an adage from the 1960s that started the traditional marketing mix. And I think it's very durable now: price, product, place, promotion. So that challenge, and flying home the next day, I got out my pad and I wrote down, how do I explain what I mean? What is a reputation management journey? Because each one of those Ps in the marketing mix, as a leader, I can assign a role. I can have a vice president of place, a vice president of product, a vice president of promotion, and I can assign budget to it. And in corporations and in businesses, if you can't do those 2 things, it's really just kind of a good idea. But if you can put a label and put someone in charge of it, give them a title, and you can put budget behind it, that's how things get done. It's true, big company, small company. So I went to go create these 4 A's. And so I went on this journey to think about the 4 A's, and the 4 A's build from bottom up to top. And this first notion of awareness, assessment, authority. There's intentionally, and we'll show copies of the book, there's intentionally a solid blue line right there before you get to the 4th A, which is action. And let me walk through the 4 of those. So that's the journey of how we got to the 4 A's. Was this amazing CEO challenged me to come up with the 4 A's to explain it, and it's subsequently become kind of the framework to explain reputation, and actually a way to manage it, which we have already in our first part of our conversation illustrated is pretty difficult to manage. So the first part is this notion of awareness. And that is about self-awareness, understanding who you are. What do we think people expect of us? And it's very reflective. It's very interpersonal. It's very self-aware about the organization, asking kind of your leadership team to workshop that and think about that from this notion of a basic foundation of our own self-perception of us and our reputation. So there's a number of tools that we've created to help companies do that. The next step is this notion of assessment. And basically assessment is, once you've got a level set of awareness and a level set of understanding about your beliefs, go ask people. That's assessment. So assessment's a survey and public opinion. And you can either ask employees, stakeholders, regulators, customers. You can ask, what do you expect of us? What is your expectation of us? What is the expectation that you have of us of what we're going to do next? And there's lots of different tools and tactics on how, and also related to budget, on what you want to do on that. Is that you have this notion of assessment. So the first 2 phases are about, what do we stand for? What do we know about ourselves? What do other people think about us? And how does that impact what we know about ourselves? And then the third step is this notion of authority. And what authority is that depending upon who does those first 2 steps, it's typically a communications team or someone in marketing or sales. That's kind of the initiative leaders of that. Authority is then going to your leadership team and saying, can we actually walk this walk, not just talk the talk? Because that's when companies get in trouble. And so if in the Tesla example, if Tesla started doing reputational things that you and I would scratch our head at and say, I'm not sure Musk can pull that off, they didn't check in on authority. They didn't check in that phase. So that's the place where you get authority from your senior leadership team. If you're a publicly traded company, that's when you talk to your board about going on this journey and doing something about it.
And that is when you talk to the attorneys. Let's be honest. They do need to be part of this process.
And authority, I write in the book, is multifaceted. There's self-authority. Yes, we want to go do this. There's your leadership authority. There's subject matter experts authority, which I talk about as the legal folks. There's your board. And in some contexts, there's regulators that fit in that. So it's being really conscious about that. Then there's the solid blue line. The solid blue line separates those first three phases from action, which is the top of the pyramid that's there. And that's a barrier and a buffer between consultants like us. Okay, is that there's this membrane between the work of the three levels to action, because too often agency partners and or well-intentioned communicators say, well, let's just write a check to the United Way, or let's just give out red ribbon. Let's give out red ribbons for, LGBTQ issues. Let's just, let's have our own parade for Martin Luther King Day, or let's give everybody a raise.
Right. Let's build that good bank of good opinion. But they jump to action, and they don't know the self-awareness. They've not asked people. Reputation is not difficult. Just ask people, what do you expect us to do? And then go do it. And then they don't have the authority. And so that when the rubber meets the road, when someone asks about an LGBTQ issue to a senior leader, they're kind of dumbfounded by it. Right. So why did you support that? It was great that you did that. Why did you do that? Don't know. Yeah. So that membrane. You told me to. Exactly. Or yes. Fortunately, hopefully I've stopped doing that. But that's why there's that blue line that's there, is this membrane to stop well-intentioned people to jump to the top, to action. And the way I equate it is that I lived overseas for a while, and I hung out with some of the embassy, the Marines that guarded the embassy. And so they were sort of focused on doing physical activities and things like that. And so one of these guys, we decided to do a marathon. And one of these guys decided like a cocktail party, well, not cocktail party, we were sitting at a bar together. And he said, well, I'm going to do that with you next Saturday. And this was like Thursday night or something. And he failed. And so that's my example of jumping to action. There was no self-awareness. There was no assessment, and there was no permission. He didn't ask his wife. He just said, I'm going to go do it. And it didn't work. Running a marathon's a big deal. And so if we agree that reputation is shaped over a long time, it looks like a marathon. So that's kind of neat construct in there. So that's the 4 A's, and that's kind of how it worked. The book takes a historical perspective of that and then offers some practical tips for how companies can actually do that. Right. And of course, one of the things that's very important in all of this is when you're doing awareness, assessment, and authority, you can actually be stopping things from happening in the future because you're going, oh, wait a minute, this has the potential to become an issue. Say as you're doing your assessment and people are going, well, we think that you're always going to be the price gouging people. And you're like, well, wait a minute, that's not what we want to be. So, you can fix things and maybe even keep them from happening. And because a crisis is that point, where something happens. And, there's, except in things like a hurricane or something like that, there's a lot of things in before then that could have taken place to stop them from even happening. Very few is it a singular event. Very rarely is it a singular event. Right. And even with a singular event, there are still things that you could have done. Natural disasters is a great example. Have you made sure that people know how to evacuate your building? Totally. Have you made sure, we talked about an active shooter. I mean, we hate the fact that people are having to have active shooter drills. Yep. And it's funny because, I'm of the generation where we had the A-bomb drills. Where we had to, and I still remember, I was a sixth grader thinking, I'm pretty sure this desk, laying under my desk is not going to help, but, it made them feel better. Yeah, but yeah, so now we have active shooter drills and things like that. So you can take steps in advance so that if something happens, hopefully things will be better. And you also, we mentioned financial. I mean, there are all sorts of things, it just was, we kind of jokingly talked about the coronavirus, but I heard on the news today that they are shutting down all of the movie theaters. 70,000 movie theaters in China, which could have a $1 billion impact on the movie industry. Sure. Well, how do you plan for something like that? Okay, well, you can't. Because you can't plan for a coronavirus, but you can plan for something might happen in the economy.
Yes.
You know, and so that's where all of this comes in, that we can't be ostriches to start with. You know, we have to have been taking those steps to make sure. And yes, a big part of it is, you know, doing things in your community. You know, we were talking about, you know, getting negative reviews on Yelp, on Google, on Facebook, whatever. I mean, the company should respond. You know, we always want it. But what we really want is a whole bunch of our fans and raving customers that are so supportive. We want them to be the ones responding. So that's all part of how we're building up these reputations, so that if something bad happens, maybe it won't be as catastrophic.
And that's back to where we started about reservoir of goodwill, benefit of the doubt, so that you have done that and built that over time. And I believe that there are, like we said earlier, you could just be a good company, don't even think about this, and get lucky.
Right.
But I believe that, like legal, janitorial, HR, operations, it can be managed and can be managed like any other discipline within an organization. Right. And that's kind of the premise of the book, is this way of actually managing what had been perceived to be, because I've heard CEOs that have told me this, is that, you know, we're not going to do that because we're just good people and we're just going to keep doing good things. And that's better than being bad, but you can actually manage it. You can actually do that in a construct. So you make so many wonderful points. And, you know, one of the things that I get asked is that's why I talk about that risk and strategic, preventable, and external, and that sorting and that readiness that you talked about, is that, you know, coronavirus, you're right. I think it is a fool's errand to articulate the permutation of every possible risk that could happen and write a white binder and a white binder of the crisis plan that goes on the shelf. I'm sure you've
really dusty.
I'm sure the consultants have sold you a ton of those, and you're familiar with those, and you may have even written a few back in the day.
Oh yeah.
Okay? And so I was with this client, and there was 38 of them listed across a shelf, literally on a shelf behind someone's desk. And I said, well, what about 39? Why'd you stop at 38? Yeah. I'm sure, but coronavirus and shutting down the movie theaters, we might not be able to pinpoint that it's that particular virus, but we know enough about SARS and we know enough about foodborne illness and we know enough about like topics that we should think about it. And so for small businesses, one of the questions that I get asked is, okay, this is all great, this corporate stuff, but what can I do? I don't have a PR department, or I don't have a this or that. What can we do about it? And so the simple tip that I give people is that whether you're a 5-person team or a 500-person team, it doesn't really matter. At a senior level meeting, your weekly leadership team, quarterly, annual, your board meeting, whatever, take a few minutes and pull out the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times, rip a headline and say, what if that had happened to us? What would we do? Doesn't matter what it is, whether if it's an adjacent industry or a completely foreign industry to you, but to ask yourself, that is that baby step, but it's actually very powerful. That is that step that organizations can take about what you were just talking about readiness, about getting ready. You don't have to hire us or hire a fancy consultant to take you on this risk mapping journey and all that complexity that we do for our larger clients, but for a team to say, what if? What if that had happened to us? What would we do? That's a great leader. That's a leader that is thinking about the reality of these situations, and he learns about that moment, that he learns about, okay, well, if that had happened, but he also learns about his team's thinking, his or her team's thinking in that context. So that's I love that exercise, and I've watched small companies do it, family run, 6 people sitting around a table, and there's like 7. So it's really exciting.
Right. You know, and more than likely, you can find an example of something in your industry. So you really can say, what if that happens to us?
Totally.
You know, and then, you know, we talk about the leaders again, whether it's, you know, you're the CEO, you know, of the Richard Branson level, or, you know, me or you, you know, what is our personal reputation? You know, what can we be doing to make sure that, you know, if something happens, you know, what should we be doing?
Yeah, I'm thinking about that individual's voice, absolutely, the way they show up on social. I think more CEOs are showing up on Twitter and showing up on social. So absolutely, I think doing that and curating that and cultivating that is an important role. And I am one, and you are as well. I empathize for CEOs. There's a lot on our plate. There's a lot on their plate. But this is you're right, that personal reputation, personal branding. There are better experts on that than me, but that is really, really important, right? Because it shapes, because those two examples, Musk and Branson, when we think of those brands, we think of those leaders, GE and Jack Welch, right? Microsoft, Bill Gates. We think about that. When I think about my bank, I think about that president. And it's a bank nobody's heard of, and they've got five little branches. But I think about James because he represents the customer service and the expectations that I have.
Right. And he probably also does things like volunteer in his community, serve on chamber committees, or maybe as the head of the chamber. All of those various things, and yeah, we do have lots of things on our plate. So you do have to pick and choose. You might say, okay, I'm going to go twice a year and do a Habitat for Humanity home. Okay, that's great. And to my way of thinking, it is far better to do something small and meaningful than to try and do a whole bunch. When I look at somebody who tells me, well, I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, this and this and this and this and this, and I say, when was the last time you posted? Okay, then they shouldn't be on any of them.
Right. When my consultant reminded me to, was the last time I posted.
Oh, well, when my team won the football game.
Right. But I want to make it's clear, and I want to be mindful of time, is that leader, so let's talk about James, the banker. Do Habitat for Humanity, join the chamber, lead the chamber, whatever. Yes. But it's also okay to just treat your employees really, really well and have town hall meetings with your employees and sit and talk about it, because it's the worst thing for some leaders is to force them into those situations.
Oh yeah. When you see them at Habitat for Humanity and they do not want to be there.
Exactly. So don't do that. But it's okay. Everybody, you don't have to be, on a billboard. Just it'll get through that you lunch and learn with your employees and you're teaching them trends of the banking industry. That's pretty valuable too.
And of course, your employees have absolutely positively got to be your best advocates.
100% best ambassador you got.
That's, and that I think is one of the things that, people forget during times of crisis also, is they forget that they need to talk to their own employees to
Internal is critical.
Here is what has happened, folks. And you have to trust that you're probably going to give them more information than you're putting out in the public. And you have to trust that they're not going to put it out there. And now clearly there are things that you're not going to tell them, but it's okay. But you know what, if you tell me, I am trusting you with this information, I'm going to think, wow, okay, that's pretty cool.
Intangible benefits, huge benefits that come from that. And if you use the model that I wrote about, you learn about that level of trust. We don't just trust universally. There are levels of trust. In that awareness process, that's where you start unpacking all that stuff. You unpack that, you unpack it there. You also unpack about those risks that are there. So there's a lot of learning. And so you're right on. And you also learn whether your CEO is going to be good at Habitat.
Right.
Or not. Or whatever the example is.
Yeah. And it could be that they're not. Back to my experience when I served as a crisis management person, our CEO was not the best spokesperson.
Totally.
And he recognized that. That was really nice that I didn't have to tell him that. And so we had another very high level person who was designated as our official spokesperson, but depending on what happened, that CEO still knew that there might be times where he was going to have to be the first person speaking, but then saying, I'm now going to turn it over to.
Yes.
And so that's the important thing is, we got him out there. We had enough media training so that he could handle 2 or 3 sentences.
Totally.
And, and then he turned it over to somebody who really was very good at it.
Yeah. It's not 0, but it might not be 100. So yeah, absolutely. Super smart. Say we're sorry. You've done great stuff. This is amazing stuff.
It's such fun, and I love it, because unfortunately things happen. We do have, whatever, crises that happen through no fault of our own or through fault of our own. And so we do have to deal with it. We can't depend on, I mentioned, okay, put it off. You can't always depend on that. So be prepared. Let's be good Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and be prepared for these things. But, in the meantime, Bill, tell us, because, okay, so we've got your book. Hold it up again. So critical moments, the new mindset of reputation management. Great, absolutely. Fast read, and as I mentioned, that's personal reputation. That's your business reputation, whether you're a company of one, a company of a million. Great information out there. But tell us, how people can work with you if they've reached that stage where, oh my gosh, they need an organization like yours.
So we try to be super generous on LinkedIn. We try to write a blog post a week and share copy and content, and we think that's there. So LinkedIn is a great way to find us. Our corporate website is Kith, KITH.co. That's a great place to find us. And then, all those have channels to have emails to me, but those are the two best. We do a lot on Twitter. But the two best places to find us is just Bill Coletti, Coletti on LinkedIn, and then Kith, KITH.co, which is our corporate website.
Perfect. I love it. Well, do you have any final words to leave everyone with?
Now, just really want to encourage people to do that what if exercise. Just say, what if this had happened to us? And as you mentioned in the industry, that's awesome. But I just think there's such power in reflection. And I think if organizations did that, it would help them on this journey. It might not make them perfect, but it'll at least make them a lot more aware.
Perfect. I love it. Well, like I said, we could talk about this for hours. I mean, this really is fascinating. And so, we obviously need to have you on again because this is something that is continually happening. And so anything we can do to help people prepare for it, I would love to have you on again to talk about this.
It'd be my pleasure. And thank you for what you do, Deb. You share amazing content with so many people and have so many cool guests. So thank you very much for what you do.
They're so much fun. My guests are so much fun. Well, I am Deb Creer. I've been having an absolutely delightful time talking with Bill Coletti. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.